Who was the better three-peat Bulls team? Was it the first or the second?
To me, it was the first. It was the first because it was Jordan at his best in his prime, and Scottie Pippen had really elevated. They were youthful, and their defensive tenacity was extraordinary. They could press you full court anytime they wanted to and wreak absolute positive havoc upon you, as they did against the Lakers, as they did against the Portland Trailblazers, as they did against the Phoenix Suns. You got to remember those teams they were going up against. Yes, you were going up against Magic, and it wasn't with Worthy and Kareem and all of those guys the first go-round, but they ultimately went through the Pistons in order to get there. The second go-round, the Portland Trailblazers, people keep forgetting how good they were. They had Drexler, they had Terry Porter and these boys, so you couldn't ignore that. And then that Phoenix team with Barkley. Yes, you had Barkley, but Kevin Johnson could really, really ball. Dan Marley was a big-time dude coming off the bench as well. And so when you looked at the Phoenix squad as well, I just think that I take into account all of those things and who they went against when the Knicks and Pat Riley brought bad boy basketball to the Garden, and they were going up against the New York Knicks. Reggie Miller and the Indiana Pacers were trying to ascend as well. The list goes on and on. I think the first team, because of its youth and its defensive tenacity and the three-headed monster they had I wouldn't say a monster, but they had three-headed guys or four-headed guys. You could distribute 18 to 24 fouls with Cartwright and all of those boys. I just think from a complete package, the first three-peat team was a little bit better because Jordan and Pippen were in the primes of their career, and they were better.
I actually think Pippen was in his prime the second go-round, but Jordan was absolutely in his prime the first go-round. That's the greatest player ever, and I understand why you would like that first three-peat because Jordan was in his prime. Let's not forget, the second three-peat, Jordan was a shooter now from three. He was hitting 40%, 37% in different seasons from three. He wasn't doing that the first time around, so he had added an element to his game. But beyond that, Stephen A., there are two reasons why the second three-peat was the better Bulls team, even if its best player wasn't quite as good. By the way, the second three-peat Jordan is still clearly better than anyone else who ever lived. So really, we're comparing him to himself, who's even better the first time. But you have to understand, I resent this thing where the big three, and you mentioned Kukoc. Kukoc was an excellent player. The big three was Jordan, Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, Hall of Famer, arguably greatest defensive player of all time. Really strong argument, greatest defensive player since Bill Russell, meaning of the modern era. You know who his competition is? Well, one of them is Scottie Pippen on the same team. You could argue that the three greatest defensive players at their positions, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, were all on the same team. Rodman grabbing 17 boards a game, defending small forwards, power forwards, center, at elite levels, by the way. It was amazing. Also, Ron Harper. If people forget Ron, guys like that. Steve Kerr shooting 52% from three. Then look at, not to mention Kukoc, now look at the competition they played. They swept the Shaq Penny Magic 60-win team, swept them. And then they had to play a Supersonics team in the finals that won 64 games. They played a Utah Jazz team in consecutive finals after that had won 60-plus games. Even on the way to the finals, they were getting stiff competition from the Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning Heat. But when you look at the amount of talent on the second three-peat, which is why they won 72 games one year, greatest team of all time, plus the competition that they beat, which is easily forgettable because those guys didn't win championships. But if not for the Bulls, don't forget, that Jazz team unseated, was it the Jazz or the Sonics, who unseated the Rockets, who went back-to-back in Jordan's absence. The second three-peat Bulls is the greatest dynasty and greatest team of all time.
Max, I vehemently agree with you. It's the second team. People forget that Tony Kukoc, his nickname was the Magic Johnson of Europe. My man had won multiple MVPs in Europe before he came over to play for the Chicago Bulls. And I would agree with you on Dennis Rodman. And then I would say this to you, Stephen A. Smith. Which version of yourself is the better version? The version from 20 years ago or the version right now? Can you answer that for me?
Well, I think the version right now, yeah, sure. I can do that.
Okay, so here's what I would say with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, even though he may not have been as athletic, he was like fine wine. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen understood how to play together. This team, you're not essentially saying who they're competing against as it relates who they beat in the playoffs. Let's match these two teams up against each other. I like my chances with Dennis Rodman. I like my chances with Scottie Pippen and Tony Kukoc. The versatility of this team. They may not be the young Thunderbirds that they were before, but they still understand how to play the game, and they're more efficient with their energy. They're more efficient with their time. And by the way, this up here, Stephen A. Smith, that was the difference between the second three-peat team and the first three-peat team. The second three-peat team had been there, done that before. They were experienced. They understood how to maintain their bodies, and he still had that competitive will. I'm telling you, that second team with that three-headed monster of Kukoc, Pippen, Jordan, yes, add in Dennis Rodman, that was the best three-peat team of all time.
Well, listen, they both won. My position is that I'm going by the eye test. They obviously knew how to win, and they were wiser. There's no question about that. But I like the first three-peat team. That's my personal preference. When Max brings up the fact that with Dennis Rodman they were better, I don't disagree with that. But let's not act like it's so flagrant. Yes, Tony Kukoc couldn't shine Dennis Rodman's shoes on the defensive side of the ball.
So
no question about it.
You do agree with that? You do agree that the second three-peat team was better? That's what you're saying? You do agree with that?
No, I don't. I said I do not. I believe it's the first. No, I didn't. I said it's the first three-peat team. It's the first three-peat team. I haven't changed my position. What I'm saying is I respect. I said they both.
Who was better?
Talent-wise, who was better? I felt the first three-peat team was. I mean, if you add Tony Kukoc and Dennis Rodman, you could look at them. But I wanted to address the point about defensively with Dennis Rodman. Yes, they were better, but offensively, Dennis Rodman couldn't touch Tony Kukoc. So to me, I look at Tony Kukoc. Offensively, that was a significant upgrade. Where Jordan and Pippen were dominant was on the defensive side of the ball. And I think in the first three-peat, they were even more lethal than they were in the second three-peat defensively. That's my belief. Offensively, Max, to address your point about the three-point shooting on the part of Jordan, he was actually better with the first three-peat. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.